in karate we get criticised for having, you know, low stances, and people think that these things are impractical. But looking at it from its simplest level, if we both start to push, then actually the leverage is with the person with the lower hip. So in order for me to dominate, I need to get my hip under there in order to create the pressure. So how does that apply to bunkai? Because you don't stand around pushing each other, do you? Well, let's have a look. If I were involved in a throw and I got to here, then that takes too much work. But if I simply drop my hip, then it becomes easier. If I were looking at driving someone back, and we're scooping from here, with my hip up higher, it's harder work. But if I drop my hip, then it becomes easier. Now, whether that's this move or whether it's part of this move, you get the principle being the key here. So if I were looking at just scooping up and dropping a hand down like this, from here, just getting solid resistance there, it becomes a problem. But in order for me to get any kind of leverage on this, just dropping my hip makes it very different. So our principle this time is to say that if I'm doing an application, I might very well want to look at the relative positions of the hips. If it's too high, I'm going to have a problem. So a key is then to drop your hip. Now, we've already seen that we have stand up as a point of application as well. But the key for dropping people down is that I need a lower hip in order to do it. So a lot of our strength comes from our ability to get down low in order to make something happen. Now, we just temper that with the idea that if I get down too low, I can't move. So I need to be able to keep it mobile, and the magic position would seem to be that in training we want to make sure our belt drops through our stance instead of floating above it. If your belt is flicking around over your leg without making any kind of contact with it, then it's probably a wee bit too high. So we just check that as part of our training, as part of your kata. If you're doing a move, is your belt inside your stance, or is it flicking about over the top of it? Now, people are always going to argue the point that a lot of the Okinawan martial artists will have, you know, a high neko ashidachi, but the key here is the, instead of the back stance is what I'm saying. The key here is that the belt is going to move through the stance, so even when you're sitting up in a high neko ashidachi, there's still the movement through the stance instead of just around it, where there's no facility to use both of the legs involved in the movement of the hip. So just check it. Next time we're looking at a move from a kata, are we working through the stance? Are we getting the hip involved in the motion, or is it still floating about on top?